Welcome to the channel, guys. My name is Jess. So CPI data came out bullish and Bitcoin rallied all the way up to $105,000. But there are still warning signs that Bitcoin is on the edge of another potential breakdown. So let's dive into the video today to talk about the most recent weekly candle close and what it could mean, warning signs that a breakdown is on the table, and how that all tallies up on the short-term price action. Before we dive in, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And sign up to my free Telegram for more regular Bitcoin updates. If you're a trader and you're interested in joining my VIP channel, be sure to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setups with exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Alrighty guys, so diving right into the charts, let's do a really quick recap of the recent price action and the context before we dive into our analysis. So on the short time frame here, we're on an hourly chart. We can see that Bitcoin has had a little bit of a choppy last couple of days. In my last video, when we did the short time frame analysis, we were traveling in what had been an ascending triangle structure, so that was bullish. But then later on, we went on to invalidate that pattern, and we had some pattern shifting, right, leading to the development of an ascending channel, which is on the flip side quite bearish, right? They generally have a bearish play out, and upon losing that lower trend line as well as the 50 EMA, which we've been above as a level of support since 95k, so that was really big. Losing both of those levels, a trend line and the dynamic support, we crashed all the way down to $100,500, right, where we went on to retest the 200 EMA here on the hourly chart. So we can see since that correction, Bitcoin has seen a little bit of a bounce here. CPI data came out last night as well, which caused a rally all the way up to $105,000. So as you can expect from that, CPI came out relatively bullish. We had year-on-year inflation go down by 0.1% as opposed to consensus, so it was at 2.3% as opposed to 2.4% consensus, and CPI came out at 320.7 as opposed to 320.8. So overall it was bullish, and we've had a lot of bullish news this week in terms of the sort of economic environment surrounding Bitcoin, with the trade deals with China, the tariffs were slashed, and the trade deal with the UK as well. That was really big news. So all of that sort of, pushing us in the right direction towards lowering inflation and towards having interest rate cuts on the horizon. So the big question in today's video is, after this little rally with that news, has it been enough, right? Are we seeing, is this recovery enough to actually flip the charts to being bullish? And we'll talk about why they might be potentially looking bearish today in today's video as well, and what we really need to see to actually signal that Bitcoin is ready for another rally. So zooming out into the weekly chart, let's talk about why there could be a potential correction coming up on the horizon. So taking a look here, what we're really looking at is this weekly range, right? Bitcoin re-entered it a couple weeks ago, and our most recent weekly candle close just last Monday, for those of us in Australia, was really important because we had gone on to essentially retest the top of that weekly range at $104,400 before the candle close, right? We can see that green wick just above this black line. So that would have been exceptionally big, because essentially that would have suggested a macro breakout on the weekly charts, right? We're closing higher on the weekly time frame than Bitcoin has ever done historically, and would have essentially pushed Bitcoin into what would have been very, very likely continued price discovery and new all-time highs. But what we ended up doing is testing that level as resistance, right? There was a massive level of resistance at the level. We can see it across both the weekly time frame, the daily, and even the hourly charts. And Bitcoin ended up closing the weekly candle just below it at $104,000. So as we approach that weekly range, of course, it's looking bullish in terms of potential breakout. And when we see that breakout, that could be huge. The measured move of this channel alone takes us to around $115,000. But the problem is, until we see that breakout, there is a potential, because resistance is still resistance, for us to see an actual correction, right? Will we reject quite heavily and quite aggressively from the top of that weekly range and see a potential movement, that could go as low as the base of that range, right? at $93,000. So right now, over the last couple of days, we can see that the current weekly candle is struggling a little bit. We're currently looking like a doji candle, a little bit of indecision there. So we've got a lot of buying pressure towards the middle of this weekly range. That is very clear since the, sort of massive recovery over there. And we could see that on the hourly charts as well, that really aggressive bounce from that 200 EMA on the hourly chart. But we can also see here from this large wick on the top side that there is also a significant amount of selling pressure that we have not been able to push through just yet. And so this sort of macro positioning for Bitcoin is serving as the context or the broader context for what's happening on the short time frame and those warning signs that are developing across the daily and the short time frame charts. So heading over to the daily chart, let's talk about exactly what kind of warning signs I'm looking at to signal the potential rejection from the weekly range high resistance. So on the daily chart over here, we can see that resistance mapped out by the Smart Money Concepts indicator, and that is this red rectangle of the red blocks starting at 103.3 thousand and 106.3 thousand dollars. So if Bitcoin was to break out and signal that we're going to see the weekly chart breaking out and move into price discovery and all-time highs, what that's going to look like is a movement into 106.3 thousand dollars, that red box, and then a candle close above 106.3, the top of that box, flipping this liquidity zone from a level of resistance to support. And as support, that should facilitate continued movement above 106.3 and therefore also above the weekly range high at this black dotted trend line. So the targets then would be, $110,000, the week high, or the current all-time high, and then a movement into price discovery. However, until we do that, as we currently sit at resistance, what we're watching out for to signal a potential rejection is this uptrend here on the RSI. So across the last couple of weeks, as Bitcoin's traveled upwards, we've seen uptrending momentum as well, right? So that's been good. It's been confirming and validating the rally. But if we see that at this level of resistance, RSI flips below this trend line and goes negative, that essentially tells us that at this level of resistance, bullish momentum has exhausted and we're more likely to then see a correction. And so those levels on the way downwards start at 100K, 97K, this next liquidity zone here, which also has confluence with the 50 EMA, the 200 EMA, and this 88K level as well. So 100K is probably the most important level of support that we have here on the daily time frame, and that is because historically, when we've gone on to retest $100,000 and we bounce and sort of establish that level as support or validate that level as support, that is generally when Bitcoin goes on to rally to new all-time highs. So we had 108 all-time high created here, and we had the $110,000 all-time high created here as well, right? So that should facilitate in a bounce a push above 106 and a bullish daily and weekly candle close, and hence the breakout. Now we can see, looking at the RSI uptrend, that we are very, very close to retesting that trend line right now and potentially seeing that breakdown. So let's dive in a little bit further into the shorter time frame price action and talk about the triggers on the 4-hour and hourly charts. So starting off on the 4-hour time frame, we can see that over the last 5 to 6 days of price action over here, Bitcoin has really hit a wall, right? And that wall is $104.5 to $105,000, this red little line of resistance on the short time frame. And so the trigger on the short time frame charts for a breakout would be a push above this current RSI downtrend, the bearish divergence that we're experiencing at this wall of resistance, which would also push the price action, or should push the price action, above $105,000. If we break above there on the 4-hour time frame, closing above that level, as well as buy side liquidity at 105.7 thousand, that will very likely trigger a move at the very least to retest 106.3, that daily chart sort of end of that liquidity zone, and closing above there, of course, have the higher time frame breakout. And until then, the trigger for the next leg downwards here on the 4-hour chart is a continued loss of bullish momentum as we continue to travel below our downtrend here and falling below 101.5 thousand, and sell side liquidity at 100.6 thousand, right, the wick low here. That should trigger then a move to retest new sort of range lows on the short time frame. So like I said, we have a volume gap right below 100.6k, the most recent range low. So that takes us right down to $100,000. And then below that, we have another volume gap, taking us right down to the next level of support at $97,000. Let me just really quickly draw that in. Right, and on the hourly chart as well, zooming in just a little bit further, we have our current short time frame uptrend. So this is the uptrend that's taken Bitcoin through the recent bounce after CPI news came out and after we established a local short time frame bottom at 100.6 thousand. This is that uptrend here, and a loss of that uptrend as well as the prior lows, that's going to sort of map out the leg downwards on the short time frame as well, and the continued rejection from our resistance at, you know, the weekly range high, the daily chart, as well as 105k on the short time frame. So overall, guys, even though we just had really bullish news come out with CPI and a really bullish week overall with the trade deals on the tariffs and stuff, we're still seeing a little bit of a struggle for Bitcoin against that weekly high resistance. And even though this correction might not lead to, I'm not saying that any of this is going to lead to a macro breakdown or anything like that. On the macro time frame, as we've discussed in prior videos, everything is still looking really, really bullish. But it kind of signals a potential for, after all the rallying that we've done so far over the last couple of weeks, that have really bullish last couple of weeks, a potential correction on the short term, and how that might take us first to $100,000 as a key and most crucial level of support, and then to 97, 92, and 88,000. Of course, I don't think we're gonna go that low. That seems like a really, really long way to go, and would invalidate a lot of what Bitcoin's done on the high time frame charts, but very likely 100k support. Alrighty guys, that is a wrap on the analysis for today. Thank you for tuning in for another episode. If you enjoyed the video, you learned something, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And join my free Telegram for more regular Bitcoin updates. If you're interested in my VIP trading channel, don't forget to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setups with exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!